People think betrayal comes with shouting and slammed doors. But that's not how I remember it. My name is Rachel Owens, and if I close my eyes, I can still hear the silence that fell the night my family turned against my sister, silence that felt like drowning. It started with a phone call, just another Thursday. The kind where you think nothing will change. My mother's voice was tight and thin. Rachel, come home. Now. No explanation. No warmth, just that old edge in her tone that always meant something was wrong. I'd like to say I didn't know what was coming, but in truth, I'd seen the cracks long before they split us open. I walked into the living room and found my father sitting stiff on the couch. Hands folded so tightly his knuckles were white. My mother paced, arms folded across her chest, mouth pursed, and Claire, my older sister, stood in the corner with her shoulders squared and her jaw clenched. Twin girls pressed close to her legs. She looked so small and so impossibly strong. At the same time, I remember the way her eyes flickered to mine, searching, almost pleading, but neither of us said a word. My mother broke the silence. Your sister, she said, voice trembling with a fury she tried to hide, has decided to disgrace this family. She spat out the word divorce like it was poison. She didn't mention Claire's bruises. The way her husband's shadow loomed. Even when he wasn't in the room, all she cared about was the story the neighbors would tell. The whispers that would follow us in church, at the grocery store, at every family gathering for the next decade. My father didn't look at Claire once. He stared straight ahead, face gray, lips set in a thin line. You've made your choice, he said quietly, as if it hurt too much to speak any louder. We have to protect this family's honor. And just like that, they cut her off. No questions about the pain she'd carried. No acknowledgement of her struggle to shield her daughters from a life none of us saw. No arms reaching out, just a wall rising, brick by silent brick. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw something, to beg them to see the truth behind Claire's decision, but I was frozen. The weight of their disappointment pressed on me like a winter storm. Cold and heavy and unrelenting. I could see it in their faces. If I took one step toward Claire, if I said one word in her defense, I would be next. So I stood there, still as stone, and watched my sister gather her courage. She knelt down to her daughters, whispering something I couldn't hear. Her hands shook as she took theirs in hers. No one stopped her. No one even said goodbye. The only sound was the door closing behind her, and the soft, broken sob of one of her girls as they disappeared down the walkway. That was the moment our family broke, though we pretended for years that we were whole. And I did nothing. Not then. I let my fear win. I let my sister walk out into the dark, alone except for the two lives she was now everything for. Sometimes, silence is the loudest betrayal of all. People like to say that time heals, but in my house, time only polished our lies until they shined so brightly. We almost believed them. After Claire left, life was supposed to go on as normal. My mother scrubbed every trace of her from the photo frames. My father made himself busy with work, barely speaking at dinner, always with that hollow look in his eyes. The air in our home grew thick with things we wouldn't say. But silence has a way of festering. At night, I lay awake, replaying every moment in the living room. Claire's eyes, the way she clutched her daughters, my parents' cold finality, and my own cowardice. I would lie on my back and stare at the ceiling, wondering if Claire was sleeping, or if she was staring up into her own darkness. Thinking of us, guilt settled on me like dust. Impossible to brush away. My mother insisted on routines, as if rituals could scrub out the past. Every Sunday, she marched me into church, chin high, hand gripping mine so tightly my knuckles hurt. People smiled at us, oblivious, or perhaps pretending just as hard as we were. When someone asked about Claire, my mother would smile, cold and brittle, and say, "We have one daughter now." The word stung every time, but I learned to keep my face still, my eyes steady. I learned to swallow my grief so deep that not even God could hear it. Sometimes, when I passed Claire's old room, I would pause, half expecting to hear laughter, or the twins' tiny feet pattering across the floor. Instead, the room was immaculate and empty, every trace of Claire boxed up, given away, or simply vanished. My mother wanted it that way. She said, "What's gone is gone. We must move forward." But her voice always caught on the last word, like even she didn't quite believe it. In public, my parents wore their pride like armor. My father introduced me as his only daughter at every gathering. People would glance at me with a knowing look, some with pity, others with relief that it wasn't their family. I hated those looks. I hated how small I felt shrinking into a life I didn't choose, weighed down by secrets and shame. One evening, as I set the table, my father called me into his study. He sat me down, hands folded, voice grave. "You must understand, Rachel," he said, "family is about honor. We can't let sentiment cloud our judgment. Your sister chose her path. Now you must choose yours." His words were meant as a warning, but all I heard was a plea, maybe even fear. I nodded, too afraid to say anything else, but every night, I dreamed of Claire. I dreamed of her carrying groceries up a flight of stairs, tucking her daughters into bed, holding back tears until she was alone. I imagined her walking through the world with her head high. Even as people whispered, I wondered if she hated me for staying behind. I wondered if I deserved her forgiveness. The truth is, the silence in our house wasn't peace, it was a wound that wouldn't heal. My parents could erase Claire from our family portraits, from Sunday dinners, from conversations whispered over tea, but they couldn't erase her from my heart, or the ache I felt for the sister I let walk out alone. And I started to realize, maybe the real shame wasn't Claire's at all, it was mine. I never planned to betray my parents, not at first, but grief is a restless animal, and guilt is its shadow. I would catch myself glancing at the door, half expecting Claire to return, wishing for a miracle that never came. I tried to focus on school, on chores, on the careful routines my mother enforced, but inside, I was slipping further from the person they wanted me to be. One evening, I found myself staring at Claire's old number on my phone, my heart hammered in my chest. I typed out a simple message, "Are you okay?" and hit send before I could lose my nerve. Minutes later, her reply flashed back, "We're managing. The girls ask about you." That's how it started. Just a thread of hope, thin but unbreakable. I called her when I could, whispering from the backyard, pretending I needed fresh air. Claire's voice was tired, but grateful. I heard the twins in the background, squabbling over toys, giggling in the way only children do when they feel safe for a moment. Claire never asked for help, but I could hear the strain, the quiet panic behind her laughter, the exhaustion that weighed down her words. So I started sending money, grocery store gift cards tucked in anonymous envelopes, cash slipped into birthday cards. Sometimes, I'd stop by her tiny apartment under the pretense of running errands, bringing bags of groceries or second-hand clothes for the girls. Each secret act was a rebellion, small but sacred. It was the only way I knew how to say, "I'm still here, you're not alone." At home, my parents praised me for my obedience. They saw only what I let them see, a daughter who stayed, who didn't make waves. But under the surface, a bridge was forming, one step at a time, between the life I was living and the one I wished I could claim openly. Looking back, I realized it wasn't just Claire I was trying to save. I was trying to rescue the part of myself that refused to accept that love had to be conditional, that family could be erased so easily. Each secret call, every quiet act of kindness, became another piece of the bridge that would one day carry us both home. It's strange how you can become to people without even noticing. By day, I was the dutiful daughter, polite, reliable, never challenging the fragile peace my parents worked so hard to keep. I nodded when they spoke of honor, forced a smile when my mother said, "Aren't we lucky we still have each other?" I let them believe their world was untouched, their choices justified. But at night, I was someone else entirely. Under the cover of darkness, my phone became my confession booth. I'd text Claire after my parents had gone to bed, checking in, asking about the girls' school, listening to her talk about the new friends her daughters were making or the next bill she was worried about paying. I sent her bits of money when I could, sometimes lying to my parents about where my allowance went. When the twins needed uniforms or medicine, I'd find a way, a little from my savings here, a borrowed errand there, anything to keep them from feeling alone. I watched as Claire grew steadier, her voice on the phone gaining warmth, her laughter less brittle. She never complained about what she'd lost, she only worried about giving her daughters what they deserved. Each time we spoke, I was reminded that her courage was not loud, but stubborn and constant, like the slow push of roots through stone. The longer I lived this double life, the harder it became to keep the secret. Guilt flared when my parents praised me for being a good example at family gatherings. Their pride in me felt like a costume I couldn't wait to tear off. Yet, I stayed quiet, guarding the truth because the risk felt too great. If they found out, I would lose what little family I had left. Still, I clung to my secret acts of loyalty. I couldn't erase what happened in that living room, but I could keep choosing love, quietly, stubbornly, in the spaces between what my parents believed and what my heart knew was right. And with every small kindness, I felt the balance inside me begin to shift. Time is a strange healer. It doesn't erase pain, but it teaches you how to carry it differently. Over the months, I watched Claire change in ways my parents would never see. She wasn't the same woman who'd left our house, face streaked with tears and betrayal. She was quieter now, but there was a steadiness to her, a kind of gentle strength that seemed to grow each time we spoke. With every paycheck, Claire stretched a little further. Learned to do more with less. She found a better job at a small office downtown, juggling paperwork and phone calls while her girls played in the back room. I remember her telling me, voice trembling with pride, how she'd managed to buy their first new coats for winter, no more hand-me-downs or borrowed sweaters. The twins too began to bloom. Their laughter sounded brighter. School photos arrived with new friends and shy, gap-toothed grins. I sent them storybooks and colored pencils. Simple things. But Claire always sent back pictures of their drawings taped to the kitchen wall. Each snapshot was proof that hope could take root in the unlikeliest soil. Sometimes Claire would thank me, her voice breaking with emotion I knew she tried to hide. But what she couldn't see was how much she was giving me in return. Her resilience shamed my silence and fueled my longing to do more. Where my parents saw only disgrace, I saw a mother forging a new life from ashes. Every sacrifice she made for her girls became a quiet lesson in what real courage looks like. As I watched Claire carve out a space of safety and love for her daughters, I realized she was teaching me something I couldn't have learned in that cold, proud house. What it truly means to be family. When the first cough started, none of us paid attention. My father had always been strong, unyielding, the kind of man you imagined would outlast us all. But that winter, the cough lingered. He grew quieter, slower. My mother fussed around him, her worry sharp-edged. But even then, neither of them would say the word sick out loud. In our family, illness was another kind of shame, a weakness to be hidden from the world. The change was gradual. My father stopped going into the office as much. He spent more time at home, sitting by the window, staring out at the yard he used to mow himself. My mother leaned on me more than ever. She would call me into the kitchen just to stand with her in silence, as if my presence alone could hold the walls together. With my father's illness came new responsibilities. I took on more at the family business, learning tasks he'd once guarded so closely. My mother spoke of legacy and duty, her voice trembling with the strain of holding everything together. Yet through it all, Claire's name was never mentioned. It was as if she and her daughters had vanished into thin air. I started visiting Claire more often, claiming I needed fresh air or had errands in town. She always welcomed me with tired eyes and a soft smile. The girls would tug at my hands, showing me drawings and school awards, their world so different from the silence at home. Watching Claire manage everything alone, I wondered how my parents could still believe she was the weak one. The truth pressed harder on me every day. The strength I saw in Claire was the very thing our family needed, but pride had made them blind. And as my father's health faded, the weight of unspoken words grew heavier than ever. The house grew even quieter after my father's diagnosis was confirmed. He refused to talk about his illness, insisting he was just tired, but the evidence was everywhere: pills on the kitchen table, a hospital bed in the den, the way my mother wept behind closed doors. I took over more of the business, making decisions in my father's name, learning how to wear his authority even as I mourned the man he used to be. Then came the day my mother sat me down at the dining table, her hands folded tightly, her face drawn with exhaustion and worry. "Your father wants you to have everything," she said quietly. "The company, the house, everything he built. You're our only daughter now. You must understand, Rachel, there can be no question about this. We cannot let Claire back into our lives. It would destroy what's left of our family's reputation." Her words cut deeper than any argument we'd ever had. I knew then, without doubt, that my parents would rather lose everything than acknowledge Claire's worth. Their pride was so consuming, they would erase their own child forever, just to protect an image that had already crumbled. That night, alone in my room, I stared at the papers outlining my inheritance, the business, the responsibility, the family's future. It felt like a shackle, not a gift. I thought of Claire, working late and raising her daughters with quiet dignity, never asking for anything, never demanding what she was owed. The warning was clear, side with Claire. And I'd lose my family for good. But the longer I held those documents in my hands, the more I wondered what loyalty really meant and what it would cost me to finally do what was right. The night before my father's funeral, I couldn't sleep. The house was too quiet, grief and old secrets thickening the air. I stared at the ceiling, turning everything over in my mind. My parents' legacy, the business, the icy warning in my mother's voice. Every path forward seemed tangled in guilt and shame. I kept seeing Claire's face the day she left, and the years she spent building a new life while we pretended she didn't exist. I texted Claire just after midnight, "Can I come by?" Her reply came quickly, "Of course, doors open." We sat at her small kitchen table, the twins asleep down the hall. Claire looked tired but peaceful, so different from the woman our parents described. I told her about Dad, about the business, about the responsibility pressing down on me. I confessed that I'd helped her in secret, that I'd spent years watching from the sidelines because I was afraid to choose. Claire listened quietly, her eyes never leaving mine. She reached for my hand, her touch steady. "Rachel, you don't owe me anything. You did what you could." Her words were gentle, but I felt a heat rising in my chest, a determination I hadn't known I was capable of. As the night deepened, I made my decision. I would not let our family story end in silence and shame. Tomorrow, I would speak for the sister I had lost and the woman I had found again. I would choose courage, whatever it cost me. The day of the funeral was gray and heavy, as if even the sky could not bear witness to what our family had become. I moved through the motions, shaking hands, accepting condolences, standing beside my mother as people whispered about legacy and loss. Through it all, my mind was fixed on what I needed to do. That evening, our family gathered for the memorial dinner. The air was thick with unspoken tension. As my mother began to thank everyone for coming, I stood up, heart pounding in my chest. My hands trembled, but my voice was steady. I asked Claire and her daughters to come forward. The room fell silent, forks frozen mid-air, conversations cut short by disbelief. I looked at Claire, her face wary, the girls clutching her hands, and I spoke the truth I'd carried for years. I told them how Claire had survived, how she'd rebuilt her life, how she'd shown a strength none of us had truly understood. I reached into my bag and pulled out the business documents, sliding them across the table to her in my father's name, and in mine. "I choose Claire to lead what he built. She earned this not just with blood, but with the courage and love our family forgot." For a moment, no one moved. The silence was sharp as glass, but I did not look away. For the first time, I stood with my sister, not in secret but in the open, where the whole world could see. The moment lingered, suspended in the breathless hush that swept across the table. I watched my mother's face go pale, her hand frozen mid-reach around us. Relatives shifted in their seats, some staring, some averting their eyes, not quite believing what they'd just witnessed. My heart thundered, but for the first time in years, I felt the weight of fear lift from my chest. Claire's eyes were wide, glistening with tears. She tried to blink away. The twins looked up at her, uncertain, then clung to her waist, as if they sensed something momentous had just happened. For a long, silent heartbeat, the room was filled only with the sound of their breathing and the faint tick of the old wall clock. My mother finally found her voice, but it was thin and shaky. "Rachel, what have you done?" I met her gaze, feeling stronger than I'd ever felt before. "What I should have done years ago. This family isn't built on secrets and shame. It's built on the people who fight for each other, who never give up, no matter what the world says." She opened her mouth to argue, but I shook my head. The argument was over. The truth was out, and nothing could force it back into the shadows. The guests rose, murmuring, some in quiet support, others in scandalized whispers. But Claire stood tall. For the first time since she'd left that house, she was seen, truly seen by everyone in the room, and I, finally, stood beside her, unashamed. After the dinner, Claire and I stepped out into the cool night. We didn't need words. I hugged her, feeling the years of distance and sorrow begin to melt away. The twins slipped their hands into mine, giggling softly. In that moment, I knew the story wasn't about loss or betrayal. It was about resilience, about the courage it takes to choose family, even when it's hard, even when it means standing alone. That night, as I watched Claire walk ahead with her daughters, I understood our family's true legacy was never the business or the name. It was the strength to break the silence, to stand up for love, and to finally become the women we were meant to be. If this story moved you, I want to hear from you. Would you have made the same choice as Rachel? Has your family ever faced a moment like this? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found this story powerful, don't forget to watch our other real-life confessions. There's so much more to discover. Your support means everything to us. Please subscribe and help us keep sharing voices that deserve to be heard.